as I've always said, it's not that we grow, but how do you manage the growth? And I think that's key to our city, and you can look out in the older areas and see to that end. Like I say, it's water under the bridge, but I just wish we wouldn't have done this as a city, because now here we are.
Anybody else? Okay, so the motion is to recommend approval of the preliminary and final subdivision plats pursuant to Chapter 78 of the Code, subdivisions establishing the Bricewood Subdivision Unit-3. All in favor, please signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Will be on council's next agenda. Thank you. Item 7 tonight, discussion and action on a request by Russell Young for approval of a conceptual design plan for a building addition for Young Brothers Fire Protection, 14107 Bandera Road. Turn it over to the city administrator. Is there a representative of the applicant here tonight? If we have questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I will say that I reviewed this item in addition to other members, and I have additional comments that were not included in your packet. The site plan and generally the idea of this, in my opinion, is compliant with code. I certainly am in favor of this business building an additional building to house the the equipment that's stored outside on the complex, and for that, when I was reviewing this item and looking at the design standards for the city, I thought that we need to keep that in our mind, that whatever they do, even if they just put the building as it stands on this property, it's going to clean up that site tremendously. So I do thank them for thinking that, or for including this on our agenda. The only comment that I had was, given the fact that this does front Old Bandera and Bandera roads, that the placement of such a large metal structure without any sort of rock on the front of it seemed a little out of place, in my opinion. Again, that's just my opinion, but I felt like it needed to be expressed from the staff level. So I know that the applicant included within their plans masonry wainscot as required on their plans, and so I would hope that the Commission would take that into consideration. But other than that, I think the plan, from my perspective, is perfectly fine. I just think it lacks a little aesthetics if it's just to be a metal building from Old Bandera Road.
Let me start with Richard.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And I don't know if we have a requirement for the wainscoting. I would like to see something, I would like to see it wainscoted, but I would like to get it in writing of how high up it would be and if it would be rock. Is somebody here to answer that?
Yeah, it would originally...
Well, coming up to the mic, if you would, just put your name and business address on record.
My name's Kobe Young, and we're at 14107 Bandera Road. 3 foot high, a wainscot, rock to match the existing would be the plan for now. And we'd like to, after this is done, end up redoing some of the existing building as well to kind of dress it up.
So in this commission, keep in mind, can make that part of our recommendation, stipulation of the recommendation to approve, so that it's in writing, so to speak. So, Ron.
Would you be willing to put a couple faux pillars of rock to break up the big, long look of the metal siding?
Just faux pillars that just protrude a couple feet out in front.
To give it, just to break it up so it's just not all metal.
Just for clarification, I think you're talking about on the facade of the building itself.
Right.
Not creating another porch.
No, not another porch, just, on the,
Yeah.
right there on the sheet metal.
Abutting the metal, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
That go all the way to the
Right,
roof
to
deck?
the eaves, yes.
How many are you talking? 2 of them, or that throughout the building? Or?
To break it up, 3 or 4, just because it's a long building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay. But you see what I'm saying, it would sort of make it look
Yes, sir.
to match the rest of the building you have.
That'd be nice.
The other building doesn't. It only goes to rock on that under that front porch. It would
Yeah, but when you drive by, you see the pillars of the porch,
Yes, sir.
it would just give you that.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's,
Okay.
if we had to do something like that, it
You're
wouldn't be an issue.
envisioning this as a design on the building itself?
Yeah, just to
On the
break up
front side of the building?
just the front side.
Jason?
Yeah, the design guidelines they're not explicit, but they do talk about trying to minimize, when you have really large expanses of building, trying to do some things to minimize the mass of it. And I know it's an industrial building, it's very simple, we're not gonna put big dormers on it, we understand that, but, the existing building's got this porch, which kinda helps break it up a little bit, and I think, I don't know that I'd in favor or not of columns or just something to, a little more detail on it, I think would help a lot, especially given the prominence of it. And I would like to, I would second, Rick's comments that, this is, I think we're all very excited to see this, and we're looking forward to seeing an addition and kind of getting this, a little more presentable area
Yes, sir.
downtown. So.
Yeah, we got material everywhere. We've expanded a little bit.
This is the color?
Yes, sir.
Structure.
That'd be the siding color.
So if any, pass this down, better representation of what might be in the photo of the siding itself. Is this property in Old Town?
No, no,
Not
sir.
officially in Old Town, all right. So I'm compelled to ask, I don't know how directly relevant this is, maybe more for the staff. The letter mentioned that part of the purpose here is to get the non-combustible equipment under roof. It made me think about the combustible equipment or anything else. Does that store on property, and is it in, do we have regulations regarding that as it would relate here?
I'm sure that they do have combustibles on the property. I think y'all weld and do things like that. So yeah, there's gonna be combustibles on the property. When they have a certificate of occupancy and the fire marshal has already looked at that and has contingency plans in place in case, there was an emergency at y'all's facility.
Thank you. Other questions? There wasn't a lighting plan as part of this, so I presume that lighting is not envisioned?
No exterior lighting at all at this moment.
Nothing on the side of the building.
No,
Say again?
Nothing on the side of the building.
Nothing exterior, correct, nothing exterior.
Yeah, just all interior lighting.
Are you adding, assume since you're taking out some garage doors, you're adding more roll-up doors along the sides?
Yes, sir. There'll
So
just be
how high?
2 roll-up doors,
Just two?
2 larger ones. We're gonna eliminate all those garages right now, the ones that'll be demoed,
Which side of the building will that be on, do you know?
on the north side of the property.
Okay, anything else for the applicant?
Just a comment, I don't want to be prescriptive and tell you how to do it, but I do like the comment about how to break up the large wall. Rock pillars is nice, I think that looks good, I don't want to, maybe be creative, come up with something else, because it's a cost on you too, so.
Yes, sir.
But at the same time, we want to have it look nice, so.
Absolutely. Yeah, we still need to do a little bit of design work, how to blend it in, but we want it to look nice. We're not planning on going anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
So we can have a motion at this point. Rick, how prescriptive does this recommendation need to be in terms of a design recommendation? Columns or whatnot, I mean,
That's the commission's call.
that's all, okay. So we can make that recommendation, it goes to council, and council will act accordingly.
If we make a recommendation, I mean, would it go to council or would it be approval by city staff or?
No, it
would
goes to
go
council.
It would go to city council next week.
Which can modify it or, change it however they see fit. But I've heard discussion of the 2 main issues being a way to break up the long run of the building and just to formalize the wainscoting at, I think, it said 3 feet, 3 foot. So, or anything else folks want to recommend, but to put in a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Yes.
I'll move to recommend approval and request Russell Young for approval of conceptual design plan for building addition to Young Brothers Fire Protection located at 14107 Bandera Road, provided that they have the 3-foot of wainscoting surrounding the whole building and make some sort of attempt to extend that wainscoting up to the roof line in areas to break up the massiveness of the wall.
Did you say the whole building?
3 foot?
The whole building or just the front?
3 foot around?
All the way around?
And, hang on one second, can you repeat what you said about the second part of what you said?
Just to make
Commissioner Wade, would you mind moving your mic towards your face?
Hang on just a
Sorry.
second, we got a process to go through here, so just hang on just a second.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine.
Go ahead, Jeff.
approve it, with the exception that they have the 3-foot wainscoting surrounding the building, and make an attempt to extend that wainscoting in certain areas along the walls to break up the complete size.
Okay, so the motion, the suggestion is that wainscoting all the way around and then extend it upward to break up the run of the building, to extend that upward. Okay, so that's the motion. Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so let's, hang on just a minute, we gotta go through the process here. So let's talk about the motion. Your motion, Jeff, so, the rationale here, tell us what your,
As far as the wainscoting,
yeah,
all the way around,
and the,
well, okay, I was gonna say that we kind of require that, or not require, but recommend that on existing construction, except we usually don't on the backside of the building. In this situation, where the building is located in between 2 main roads, where you can see the front as well as the back, all sides, actually, I just feel that it would look better that way.
who seconded that?
I did.
So he's taken your idea of columns and sort of adjusted it, but, and again, here we need to decide how we want to present this to council in terms of recommendations. So what would you like to?
I do agree with him, since the back street on it is a main thoroughfare also, so putting the wainscot back there aesthetically pleasing.
Other comments up here?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with all that. I think in earlier discussions, we had mentioned wainscoting all the way around, but the pillars on the front of the building. So are you saying now front and back? Because that's gonna change quite a bit with the owner. Did you intend all the way around, or are we sticking to what we discussed of at least two up front or something like that before?
For, up front, Ron, you okay with that?
Just up
on the
front, I
front,
was thinking.
Bandera roadside?
Yes.
Yeah, we can go with that.
So
Just
to
a-
amend the motion,
Wainscoting all around,
Wainscot all the way.
Would he
full
needs
full
to
pillars,
hang on a
agree
second.
to the
full pillars breaking up the front.
Okay, so whether you're calling it pillars or masonry or the wainscoting, you're talking about a way to divide the building or put a design in on the front side of the building. That's changing the motion. Does that amendment work for you?
Yes.
Okay. For you? All right, further discussion about the motion. The idea is, and when we say front side of the building, it faces, the front faces main Bandera Road. Is that correct? So, and I think you get the intent here, and I think that talking with staff and council as well perhaps could shape this more. The intent is for there to be, as I understand it, in the motion, a divide, a way to segment, if you will, the building on the front side to enhance its appearance. Does that conform with what you're saying, So anything further on the motion? Okay, so the motion is to recommend approval of the request by Russell Young for the conceptual design plan for a building addition to Young Brothers Fire Protection at 14107 Bandera Road, on the condition that 3-foot wainscoting wrap the building, and secondly, that either columns or wainscoting or masonry be extended to the roof line on the front side of the building to enhance its appeal in segmented areas. All in favor of that motion, please signal aye. Opposed? I know you had more to say, but the structure doesn't let it happen, but here's what I would suggest. This will go to council at the next meeting, Rick, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Which is on April the 11th. But in the interim, I'd suggest touching base with staff and then coming back to council. Hopefully, we left some flexibility with this recommendation. I think you get the intent of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, the front, we're definitely gonna adjust stuff. We just weren't planning on wrapping the whole building, especially
Right.
because we're not touching the.
And that, the motion reflects that as well, so. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. All right, item 8 tonight is discussion and action on a request by Parker and Parker Investment Properties for approval of a conceptual design plan for Judicial Services Company for a proposed office building at 15248 Scenic Loop Road, including site plan, building design, exterior lighting, and monument signage. I'll turn it over to the city administrator. Do we have a representative here tonight? Okay, let's sit tight for right now. I'm sure there'll be questions.
Thank you, Chair. Staff reviewed this item, and generally speaking, we are in agreement that it is compliant on both its site plan, its building design, its exterior lighting, and the signage that it has proposed. I will state that one thing that was left out of this agenda item request form was the need for a buffer zone. And is there are you Ron? Do you mind if I have him come up to the
Sure.
podium?
Just put your name, if you would, and business address on record.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Ron Alvarado with AG Associates Architects at 6800 Parkton Boulevard in San Antonio.
And you and I spoke together, correct, last week?
Uh-huh.
On a variety of issues, building height and all that. Building height, by the way, because that was one of the comments, it is in compliance with code. It's under the 40 linear feet in height, and so it does comply with code. But one thing that was brought up was the buffer zone. And given the fact that I'm using GIS maps from San Antonio, it's a little bit difficult at this point to tell whether the buffer from an R1 to a B1, or B2, excuse me, is in compliance or is not in compliance. We talked about having to possibly construct a fence. I understand that there are some people that have discussed this item with the owners, I believe.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that y'all are aware that if it's determined in the field that a fence or some sort of buffer is required, you told me over the phone that you would be amenable to that. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. No, not a problem.
Okay.
We will do what is necessary.
Thank you. So other than the buffer zone requirement, which can be handled administratively during the construction process, the signage on the signage side, I would only ask that the commission include that the landscaping be extended 2 feet from the sides of all the monument sign that's provided. But other than that, we're looking at it, the zoning and everything is correct on this, so we're recommending approval as presented.
Okay. Thank you. All right, open up for comments and questions from the commission. We have the applicant here, representative of the applicant here. So, Ron, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of concern about the light. Is it possible at night I realize they're full cutoff, to have some of them on a timer so at midnight they shut off? Or
We will
something?
investigate that, yes, and we will be real observant of that. And there may be just that one light out of the parking lot will stay on until later in the evening and possibly turned off. So we will be respectful of that, and we will investigate that to make sure, we don't want it well lit anyway.
Right.
The lighting, the type of lighting that we are proposing is not a floodlight type. It's all facing downward, and so that helps with not creating such a lot of light. But we will look to see how we can mitigate the lighting in the evening, and so we will look at that.
And what are the hours, normal hours operation?
Normal operating hours will be 8:30 to 5:30, Monday through Friday. Now, just a little bit of insight with this business. It's a family-owned business. It is strictly going to be used by the family in their business. So there won't be any outside leasing that they'll be doing. They will take over the whole building. The whole building will be for them. The second floor will be for future use, for when their children finish their college education. They will be opening up offices up there. So they will be using it. It's all within the family.
Thank you.
Yes, Mario?
Sir, so you're saying they're gonna live there?
No. They're just going to have their offices there.
Okay.
Their business.
This business, what is it? What do
Their
they do?
business, it's they offer like paralegal services for many attorneys, and so they have approximately 60 employees right now, and that is, what they're looking at right now. And so a lot of them, like I said, it's 8:30 to 5:30, and they do at times have depositions. So sometimes they do have other attorneys, and people do show up to their business. But there again, it's 8:30 to 5:30, and that's the only time.
16 employees or 60?
60.
60 employees. And the customer traffic on a daily basis, in your mind, would be?
It's going to be very minimal. It's going to be at 8:30 in the morning before 8:30, and then at 5:30. And it's strictly for the employees and when they come and they leave. They don't have a high traffic flow of people coming in on a daily basis.
And the business has room to grow, is what you're saying?
Yes, and that's why it's planned like this.
So there could be more employees hired?
I'm sorry?
More employees could come?
Correct.
Okay. A question for City, Mr. Chair, for Rick. Rick, has the city done I'm thinking about the comments that were said in Citizens of here, the environmental studies out there where for the habitat, the natural habitat, and this concerns about the stream, has that all been addressed prior to this coming to tonight's agenda?
The city does not do habitat studies on any commercial property. That's the priority of the state. And so if the state feels like it needs to do something, then it will do something through TCEQ. With regard to the stormwater, this is very preliminary. When they submit construction documents, they will have to submit stormwater management plans.
Exactly.
And then we will address those issues at that point. Again, that's water quantity that we're mostly concerned with, floodwaters, rather than water quality. They are not located, it's my understanding, they will not have to submit anything to TCEQ in regards to a sand filtration basin or anything like that, because they're not over the Edwards Aquifer zone, which would require it.
Now, to answer part of your question, the owners of the property did take it upon themselves to have an environmental study done as far as the habitat is concerned. So they have done that, and they did find that there was nothing there that was of any concern that they had to be careful to preserve. So they have taken that step on doing that investigation on their own. So they're proactive on making sure that they're not going to disturb the native grounds as much as possible. This property is 21 acres, and they're only utilizing approximately 4 acres of the whole development, and the remaining of the property is going to be left the way it is.
You speak so eloquent about these owners. I would like to ask you, with that mindset, are these people, do you know why they picked that area? Because as you heard from citizens who
Well, I guess the best way to do it is to ask, they're right here.
Okay.
And they are citizens of Helotes. They do live here.
Okay.
And this is Mr. Thomas Parker and Cynthia Parker.
Hello.
And so if you have a question, I'm sure.
Sure. I didn't realize they were here.
Yeah, no.
We don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if you don't mind, I mean, I think just to inform, if you come on up, just name and address would be great. Thank you for being here.
Thomas Parker, 22091 Scenic Loop Road.
Cynthia Parker.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Same address, I presume.
So it's kind of a, it's kind of a cool story. We actually saw the property when we were looking to build our own office building about 2 to 2.5 years ago. But when we saw it 2 to 2.5 years ago, so quick short history, we both come from families that are hoarders. And so we're the opposite, we're minimalists. And so when we saw the property that was covered with, rusty sheds and rusty cars and just piles of junk everywhere, it immediately turned us off, and we started searching elsewhere to find land. But everywhere we went, something went wrong with the property. We'd get outbid, or we were actually looking at the property. I'm kind of lost further up here off Bandera Road, and the owner decided not to agree to any of the contracts that were signed. So 2 years went by, and I told my wife, I was like, let's just go back and ask him, hey, let's work out a deal. If we pay you this much, but if you don't clean the land, we get a cut in the cost, because then we'll use that money to clean it ourselves. So the owner, Jerry, agreed to clean the land, and it took him, like 6 months, give or take, to clean it all off, but he cleaned about 90% of it. And the last couple of days, we went out there and started cleaning it. And so anyway, so to answer your question, the land is gorgeous. It is simply gorgeous. It's something like out of a movie or a book. We took our managers there, and one of my manager's comments was, can I work 7 days a week when we move here? Because he doesn't want to go. And that's what we want. We want our employees for life, and we want them to be happy. And it's going to be a great place. The heritage tree, we're going to build something around it. We're not even going to allow benches underneath it, because the estimate is it's 258 years old. We're going to allow our employees to take blankets or hammocks, to fold out chairs, to sit and relax during lunches, or take naps or whatever. But it's beautiful. We've also discussed, because we are in the legal industry, we're trying to figure out how we can come up with a covenant or a deed that would restrict anyone from touching the remaining 17 acres forever. We want to keep it the way it is. We want to protect it. Like I said, it's a dream. It's literally a dream.
And the only thing I would add is we live on 21 acres down the road, and so collectively we now want to protect 42 acres on Scenic Loop. So I too want to thank you for everything you've done to protect this area, because that's what we're so privileged to call home now. And one day we want our building to be there. So, and we're just celebrating our 25-year in business. So we're so excited to begin the next century here. So thank you.
Thank you.
I hope we answered your questions.
Thank you. I can just follow up on one thing. You had mentioned about they had, if I understood right, commissioned a study, either environmental impact study.
It's not so much an environmental impact study. That hasn't been done yet.
Right, what was it?
It was a study done on habitats.
Habitats. So I would encourage you and ask that that be provided to staff
Sure.
or council. I think that would be
more than
important.
happy. I mean, you
reference
just, if you want me to send it to you via email, I'll go ahead and send it to you.
Yeah, and I'll distribute it to
Okay.
council.
That'd be great, thank you. Jeff, questions?
Yeah, my questions were more towards the family, if that's okay.
All
Or
right,
not.
we don't need to drag you guys up here. Just one would be fine, whoever wants to talk.
You mentioned that you live close by. Are you a member of that Scenic Loop Alliance?
No, I didn't even know it existed, to be honest with you. We've only been living off of Scenic Loop for about a year and a half now, give or take. Yeah, we purchased the land about 3 years ago and built our dream home, and Lord willing, we die there. That's the plan. But I have added my email to the Scenic Loop Helotes Creek website, so I'll get all the same notifications that everyone else does.
Where are your offices currently located at?
We're off of 410 and Babcock Road in San Antonio.
Jason.
That's that.
Mr. Chairman. We'll go Jason first.
A couple questions. First, you mentioned, potential expansion. I noticed your second floor is labeled lease area. Is that incorrect?
Yeah, so the original plan was to lease it out, but when that occurred, that was about 60 days ago. Since then, my daughter has been accepted to law school, and she'll be going to St. Mary's in San Antonio. So the plan is, we want to protect it for our children. Our son is actually going to court reporting school. He's here. So he'll be taking over that portion of the business, and so he'll need some place to expand as well. And so we thought, my God, it's perfect. It'll just be wonderful.
If I can, just for the record, there would be nothing prohibiting them from leasing that space, just like any other general office building, just for the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just clarifying the inconsistencies. Michael?
Yes, I noticed the facility is located, as we're seeing the overhead photograph, to the left of the property. And why is it? I see there's the stream in the lower part of the remainder, but it looks like there's area more to the right and up.
The majority of the property is located in a floodplain, and this area where we're at is probably the highest point, and it's the best location.
Okay.
To put it, that is outside of the floodplain.
Yeah, it was just kind of hard to see here, and I figured it was something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and we wanted to get it as far away from the floodplain as possible.
Well,
Understand.
is the parking lot in the floodplain?
It looks like it is, and so we're gonna have to go back and study that, and we're probably gonna have to adjust the location of that parking lot a little bit to not encroach in it.
Right,
The city would not have any prohibition against flat work in a floodplain, just structures themselves.
understood, but cover in a floodplain, and, I mean.
Oh, I'm not telling you one way or the other. I just want to make sure that
Fair enough.
that the record is correct.
Quick question, how many cars are gonna be coming? I'm trying to think where they're gonna be coming in and out from work.
They'll be coming
I
from-
don't imagine they live here in
The
Aloha.
majority will be coming from Bandera Road. 95% will be coming from
Bandera
Bandera
Road
Road. To Scenic Loop. So we'll just turn right there and come right in. Yeah, we don't have any employees that live on that side of Scenic Loop.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And then when they leave work at 4:30 or so,
Yeah,
they'll be coming
right out to Bandera Road. Yes, sir.
And right there at that intersection where they're coming out, you don't think that's gonna be any kind of a problem?
I don't think so. I haven't seen,
There's no traffic there now.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
I don't think that there's gonna be like a caravan of cars all at one time leaving. I don't know exactly how
Oh,
the
that's
people leave.
great
but-
point. They don't all leave at one time.
So,
So
That's good
they'll-
to know.
Yeah, they leave in bunches, tens.
And if I may, a traffic impact analysis will be required as a part of this development, so we would address that at a later date.
Okay. This is a question I had.
So, Mr. Chair, all these little side things that we discuss at a later date, we still move forward and let this happen, and then we trust, and we know, because we're surrounded by good people, but that this is all gonna be addressed, or could we reconvene and get all these reports to make sure that everything's checkmarked before we take the big jump into bringing this very respectable people, I can see, into this environment that I know it's Zone B2, but it's also primary residential, and the roadways were not constructed for businesses of 60 employees, because it's there's people who are jogging there, there's people who are walking there, there's people who are running there, cyclists, there's all kinds of pedestrian traffic. That light that the commissioner just mentioned at Scenic Loop and Bandera is, if you don't know it, you don't know how to make a left without yielding to the person that's coming. So you have to know that light very well. It's not the best. I'm not here to throw out the challenges, but I did want to mention that all these other items that would be addressed at a later date, could they be addressed before we take this type of action? That's my question of the evening.
So I remind you that the items in front of us, design, exterior lighting, signage, are the specific items we have in front of us tonight. city administrator, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's any state mandated issues that arise subsequent to our recommendation, they would be mandated, required to respond to those and cure whatever problem is found. Take the example of the floodplain or whatever else it is.
That is correct.
That-
And that's the way we handle all commercial developments that have come before us.
So that make this no different than any other, even in fact, if council takes their action on the 11th of April and subsequent to that, an issue is found, it has to be cured. It has to be reconsidered. If there's some dramatic change, let's just say hypothetically the sign's in the wrong place, there's some, they would be back to, if it's relocated to this body.
So this is
Let me just, if you don't mind.
Sorry, hang on one second. Does that answer the question?
It does. I just wanted to make sure that there's a checklist of like,
Sure.
you know, from what's decided this evening, there's going to be another level. I know about city council. We all
Right.
know about city council. These other reports, these environmental
Absolutely.
reports, these traffic reports, these types of things.
Sir.
Just to give you some additional information, as the design professionals for this project, there are codes that we have to follow, and all of these items that we're talking about are part of those, and we need to be able to submit all of that before we can even submit it into the city for permitting. Without any of that information, the city will just tell us, we need this, we need this, we need this. So all of these reports and studies that we're mentioning right now, they will, if they're required, we will be presenting them as part of the package with the final documents. We will be also having, our company as a practice brings the city involved in projects so that they know what we're doing as we're progressing with the drawings. So that way, when they get the final construction documents, they already know what they have. They're familiar with the project, they know where, if they had a question, if we answered it, you know, they have all of that. And so we have found that to be very helpful for the city officials when we work on a project like this.
Other questions up here? Yes,
Sure.
Jason first.
A couple more things. So I did kind of take note before the meeting about the rear buffer. It was at, I think it was at 13 feet, and so I guess the remedy for that would be if that was within the buffer of an R2 zone, that we would need to put landscaping and/or a fence.
Yeah, the buffer requirements generally are from the structure itself on a commercially zoned property to the lot line of a R1 zoning district. And so, again, I didn't want to affirmatively say that they did or did not have to do that, but because it's in our zoning code, unless they wanted to go before a board of adjustment for a variance request or something due to hardship of the floodplain, which I'm not suggesting, that can be addressed when it's actually field located to make sure that they do or do not have to do what our code says they have.
But that could be addressed by the staff.
That would be
Staff
addressed by our building official, yes, sir.
Did you have?
I have a couple other questions. Yeah, I forgot to mention this, in full disclosure, my firm actually had put in a proposal for this project. We did not get it. No hard feelings. We don't have any financial stake in this, but I was asked to just disclose that I had previous knowledge of this project.
Okay.
So
Yeah, in the interest of just being transparent, there's no issue here, but we wanted people to know that. Go ahead, you had other questions?
The couple people mentioned the historic Marnock property. It looked to me like the building was situated fairly far from that.
It is.
And do you know approximately how far?
I don't. I really don't. I would,
Using GI, I looked at about 200 feet or so.
I'd say it's at least that, if not more.
The rear outbuilding, it looks like it's part of that you're gonna preserve that one structure that's there. Is that,
The structure in the back?
In the
Yes.
back, up on
No,
Marnock.
that structure in the back will be removed. Actually, it's been removed already.
oh, okay.
Okay.
Good, sorry.
Okay,
Finish out.
yeah, the last two things, the height I know is, you know, it was stated that it was okay per zoning. Do we know the relative floor of the building relative to Marnock Road? And I noticed that there were some RTUs on the roof and just concerns about what the visibility of the top of the building is. I don't know how far you're cutting down, the
Yeah, we
structure
haven't
there.
investigated all of that, but we will make sure that the building does not exceed the 40-foot height that is required.
Okay. And then the last thing, trash service for the project. Is there
They'll
any-
have a private company that will.
Dumpster
A dumpster,
screened.
yeah, and we'll do a dumpster screening and so forth on that.
I just want to make a quick comment to the folks that took their time to come tonight. One of the things you might not realize, if everything goes by the code and if you like it or not, it's zoned the way it's zoned, the papers are all in order, we can't just say no because we don't want it. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Jeff, did you have a question?
I did have a question, two questions. One was, are you planning on having an access control at the front driveway, gated?
Probably so, yes, for after hours, if there's somebody that comes in after hours.
Second is, what is the plan for sewage since there is no?
We are considering a septic system for it.
And the septic system, just to be clear, would be regulated wholly by Bear County, not by
Correct.
the city of Helotes.
Okay. And that's been done before with a business this size, I assume?
Yes, there are many businesses in Helotes that are on septic.
Is this the largest business in Helotes, 60 employees? Besides Walmart?
No, there are a variety of businesses that are up Rainbow Ridge, BMC Millworks, that would have a lot of employees, but I feel sort of on the spot with that. I mean, it's
But again,
It's a
speaking to
decently
site
sized
plan, I don't know
business
that
for
it
Helotes.
directly relates to this question. Let me go over here, a couple more, and then we could hopefully get a motion going. Joe, you had a,
I have one question about the monument sign.
yes,
You know, he submitted an option for one or the other.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch
It
that.
appears that you submitted an option for one of these monument signs or the other.
That's correct. It's
You
one
wanted us
sign,
to
and
make a decision on which one we think is best.
it'll be on Scenic Loop Railroad, yes.
I didn't hear what you said. Say what you said again.
The sign will be located on the Scenic Loop Road, and I think on one of the drawings, we do show an approximate location. If you look at our sheet that's
let me just
labeled
clarify.
A102,
Can I clarify something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, Mr. Edmond, you're referring to scheme number 1 and scheme number 2?
Yes, that's right.
That's one side or the other of the monument
It's
sign
the colors.
as you travel.
right, well, the scheme 1 and scheme 2 is a color scheme, because we submitted colors, proposed colors.
Right.
And so the scheme 1 is one set of colors, and scheme 2 is another set of colors. It's
also-
stone, so the color that would be different would be the stucco portion above the stone. And that's
I
where
was
the
gonna
1
say
or
it's
2
different
comes.
material too, right?
I'm sorry?
It's different material also?
It's stone
One is
and
stucco
stucco.
and one is-
Just stone and stucco.
Okay.
Ron, did you have a
The
question?
signs are up and down from one another. One is the right side and one is the left
Right,
side.
it's
That's what
just,
I'm-
yeah, if you're coming scenic loop one way, and if you're coming up from Bandera, and then if you're coming down scenic towards Bandera, that's what the sign is showing, just that there's signage on both sides
But
of the
you
sign.
envision them to maybe look different, from one side look different than the other side?
No, it won't be different. It's just, if you're coming from one direction, you're gonna see it, and you'll see the same thing from the other direction.
Yeah,
Ron,
When you're coming down, looking at this from Marnock, we realize there's no rock or anything on the Marnock side.
Yes, sir.
Would it be possible you guys putting a wainscot or putting some rock back there?
We can look at that. We are looking at using a lot of material that is very receptive of the hill country. We do have a lot of corrugated metal and stucco on the building, and we also have a hardy siding on it. And so, we can look to see if we can incorporate some additional stone in the back.
Because, as it looks right now, it's just metal, and I guess that's, the blue is
It's metal and the hardy siding.
it's a hardy siding.
Right. Now, it's a masonry product, the hardy siding,
Yes.
and it's a V-groove. It's not like your lap siding that you see on houses. We are looking at also possibly replacing that with a stucco material.
Have you selected a color for this monument sign?
I'm sorry?
Have you selected a color for the monument sign?
A color? That's one of the colors, it's the schemes that we have that we proposed on here, and that's why we proposed, that, those are the colors that we're looking at. There's two
okay.
schemes.
Okay.
Chair, I
yeah,
included,
go ahead. They're in the back,
I included the actual,
Okay.
it's in the packet too.
Right. And those colors, we'll have to look at them once the building is there, and we're just not gonna go and put them on, because colors on a sample like this look this way, and we have to look to see how it's gonna look on the building. So they may vary a little bit in tone, but that's the idea that we're looking at.
Your blue is very bright.
And that's why I'm saying, we're gonna look at it. We always run test colors on a building, because like I said, they look great like this, but once you see them on the building, before the contractor goes and paints the whole building, we wanna see a section of it to see how it's gonna look.
On the conceptual design on A400, is that either one of these two color schemes?
On what
It
page?
doesn't look like number 1, but I can't tell if it's number 2 or not, or if it's just different.
What page are you on, I'm sorry?
A400?
A400?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, on the rendering, it's using scheme number 1. That's representing the colors as a scheme number 1.
That blue is very different than.
Yeah, that does,
It's not this.
yeah. I would have to say it's not as close.
Well, like I said, we will be looking at it, and chances are the colors will be modified to somewhat from what we're proposing right now.
So I'd like to see if we could get a motion out there. I want to thank you for your time. I'd like to clarify just one point, just make sure I understood it right. When you started asking about the back of the building, Marnock, there is not going to be an access point off Marnock, not even an emergency
We
access
are
point?
going to have to do that simply
Emergency
because
access?
it's more of an emergency, because if there's a flood and we can't get out through Scenic Loop, they've got to be able to get out if there's a heavy rain and they're working. So we will have to have an emergency exit going out on Marnock.
Also, you're gonna be cleaning up some of the brush there, so you will see the building from Marnock, right? To a point.
We're not going to be touching as much back there. We really aren't. I mean, we're going to try to leave as much of the property undisturbed as possible. I mean, there are some trees that will need to be removed, but there again, with the landscape plan, what we remove, we're going to bring in something else that is going to represent that. In other words, we're just not going to have a paved area and some grass out there. There will be additional landscaping that'll be done out there.
All right, so if we, let's see, thank you very much. Let's see if we can put a motion together. According to my notes, and this is just me taking notes, the main issues that were talked about for possible changes, assuming people are generally supportive of this, include the landscaping around the signage, a potential recommendation regarding motion sensor lighting, if that's the will of the commission, and the possibility of wainscoting on the rear of the building or all the way around. There may be other things, but those were my notes. I'd open it up or invite a motion at this time for a recommendation on this item. Like class, sometimes you wait, and somebody will speak up. Mike,
I'd like to make a motion.
please.
Let's see, let me get the words.
Yep.
I move to, I'm sorry, I'm reading the grammar here to make sure I say it correctly. I move to approve a request by Parker.
Recommendation,
I
sorry to
move
interrupt
to
you.
recommend
Thank
approval, sorry, of a request by Parker and Parker Investments Properties LP for approval of a conceptual design plan for Judicial Services Company, a proposed office building located at 15248 Scenic Loop Road, Lotus, Texas 78023, more particularly described as BCAD property ID number 242030, including but not limited to the following: the site plan, the building plan, exterior lighting, and monument signage, with the following additions: to include landscaping around the monument signage to conform to code, Recommendation to include motion sensors where practical, to reduce the lighting signature but still provide adequate security, and wainscoting on the rear of the building.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Ron, all right, so discussion of the motion. Mike,
I have nothing further.
Ron. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion?
I want to express.
Go ahead.
Although this looks like a great building concept and the design plans are phenomenal, I personally don't feel this is the right location for this large of a business. I would tend to refute the owner's statement about not being able to find any land on Bandera Road. I think there's quite a bit of land for sale along Bandera Road, and that would be more adequate for the topography of a business like this.
Thank you. Other comments? Jason, did you have? I thought you were going to say something.
No, I might ask for a slight amendment to the proposal.
What are you thinking?
Okay. I would add, just to the lighting issue that, I think a timer might also be a good solution. That could limit the hours, of light spilling out, onto the neighboring properties.
I'll agree to that.
Yeah. And then also,
So is that an or,
yeah,
motion sensor
yes,
or timing
and/or
mechanism?
I suppose. And then the other would be, just to, and I know this is taken by staff, but some effort towards that buffer, landscape buffer and/or fence as required by code.
Agree.
Is that?
Because that is important, something I missed, my apologies, because we've run into that before, so thanks for the catch.
No problem.
So we're amending to include the motion sensor or timer or timed lighting, and then the if required by code or as required by code, a landscape buffer, which staff would naturally, it'd be part of their review anyway, formalize it here. Okay. So Jeff spoke. Mario, were you going to speak to the motion?
I just want to, again, thank all the people who came tonight. I'd like to, from the citizens on Scenic Loop and the owners as well who live on Scenic Loop. I think it's great that you guys are all here, but I must say that I'm at crossroads because I live out there too. But not only that, serving on this commission is an honor, but I know it's B2, but I also think that I do hope that with all the process that's happening here, that the right foot is made forward, meaning that we respect Scenic Loop and we respect the integrity of the area. I know that businesses are important for our community, but I agree with Commissioner Wade where, it would be ideal if it was in a different location, but it's not. It's in that location. I just hope that we're mindful towards the environment out there and just as one of the citizens said tonight, they called it a park-like setting, and I totally agree with that. It truly is. It's a jewel of Lotus, and I'm not here to go against what we're thinking about tonight, but at the same time, I want to respect the fact that all the people in the room here tonight have great, great voices, and I think they should be respected and honored. So I just want to make sure that we say that publicly, and but I do hope that this will mean something better for us. But again, be mindful towards Scenic Loop.
Okay. I want to thank everyone as well for being here, and I think this has been a really fruitful discussion of the issues, and I think everybody agrees this is an important area for the city, and in my personal view, it has a lot to offer and enhance the area, while also being something that we need to be mindful of and concerned of and how it affects the broader community. As with most everything, there's a balance that needs to be struck, and I think this does have a lot to offer all of us. I'm going to read back the motion and ask the secretary to do this by roll call vote. The motion is to recommend approval by Parker and Parker Investment Properties for a conceptual design plan for Judicial Services Company, a proposed office building. Yep.
Just procedural, I think you seconded, right, Ron? I think you need to also agree to the amended motion.
I'm sorry.
Okay. We're just making sure the Robert's rules are
Yeah.
tracked here.
Good. So I'll start over. The motion is to recommend approval of the request by Parker and Parker Investments for conceptual design plan for Judicial Services Company, a proposed office building located at 15248 Scenic Loop Road, including site plan, building design, exterior lighting, and monument signage with the additions of requiring that landscaping around the monument sign conform to code. That a recommendation that motion sensor or timed lighting be utilized on the exterior where practical. That wainscoting be on the backside of the building as well. And that a landscape buffer be included as required by code. So go ahead.
Can I interject? I don't believe the fourth caveat was correct.
Correct.
I think it should have been to include a buffer that if required by code, that a buffer, I think it should be amended that if it doesn't comply with Chapter 98 zoning B2 for this buffer requirement, that it do so and that staff make sure that that happens.
So I thought the language was a landscape buffer.
Or fencing, or there can be a change in the site plan slightly to add for additional space. There's a variety of options.
Okay, so a buffer as required by code.
Yes.
And it may or may not be. Is that everybody good with that?
B2 code.
Yes.
Right. So just to clarify that. All right, so I'm not gonna read it all back, but I think everybody's good on that.
Okay.
So,
All right.
go ahead.
Mr. Chair, is there gonna be any type of color scheme which you want?
Actually, let's take a vote on this, because we're right about to vote on this, and let's let it go forward. Go ahead.
Maura Rios? Aye. Michael Blackman? Aye. Jeff Wade?
Nay.
Richard Hawk?
Aye.
Bill Evans?
Aye.
Ron Haza? Yes. Jason Whitman?
Aye.
So the motion is approved 6-1. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here for this. We have one more item to go. I'd love for you to stay, but I understand you may not. This item will go before City Council for the final action on the 11th of April, so I hope you'll be able to make it. Encourage you to attend and have your voices heard. Pause for just a moment here as people. No worries. All right, folks, item 9. Stuart, thank you for staying. Item 9 tonight is discussion, and it was a misprint. It says action. It really is supposed to read direction, but we can treat it as action if we wish. On a proposed revision to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 66, Section 51, Commercial Signs, Subparagraph B, Wall Signs, establishing size requirements for an individual business with a small building or unit facade frontage. I'm going to ask Ron to speak to this. Ron, has this, since I wasn't here at the last meeting, was this discussed?
This is
at the
the
last?
first.
Okay,
This
so
is the
let's,
first
maybe
that's
we
been-
could treat this as a discussion item for this. And why don't you speak to it? And you can reference what you have in your materials, which has the images of examples of businesses. So go ahead, Ron.
And this is to bring up, it keeps coming back to us, these 20-foot wide storefronts, that they're always having to ask for 25% or more. that we come up with a new formula to give them a little more footage that looks, but we have to kind of figure out what the practical size would be. There's a lot of questions that, you know, all of us could sit down and try to figure out what would be the fix. So every time somebody has a small frontage, they don't have to come back to us, you know, asking for more.
So the current code, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, it's, or Alex, it's 1 square foot per
Linear foot.
linear foot, with a maximum of 100. And the smallest linear footage businesses that we're looking at, what would you guesstimate they are? There are a couple examples in here.
The taco restaurant is actually 18 feet wide.
18. So that would leave them with 20 total allowables for their sign. If it's 18 feet, it'd be 18 feet, 20 would be
Right, yeah.
20. And these images that you took, these are not Helotes, right?
Yes, this is Helotes down by the mini Walmart.
Where are you talking?
It's the strip center behind.
Right at the corner of Gulf and
You mean on Leslie or Gall?
Leslie.
The small wall, okay,
Look, it's across the street. It's the ones we've gone through.
okay. This is city or ETJ?
This is, yes.
ETJ, okay. Okay, so, and your concern is that because it's doesn't allow much space,
They keep coming back to us.
and they request larger. And we typically have a 25% allowance that we can recommend overage of, so if it's 20 feet, that's 2.5 feet more, which isn't, I suppose, a whole lot. Okay, so devil's advocate here, what's the problem for the city in this situation?
We're getting stuff coming back, taking up our time, where obviously we need to get a little better formula. It'll make it a smoother process.
So the ones that are pictured here conform, as far as we know?
No.
I don't see how they could.
It's sort of,
Yeah, I think Del Norte came before us and it was too big.
right, and
Right.
it's still too big.
The city of San Antonio gave them approval.
Right. Okay.
But does well, just looking at
But
that
looking at
sign,
the other ones, none of them look, except for maybe Domino's
but
and Great Clips.
now on the taco place, do we think that looks good? Is it acceptable?
In some way, Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking, I know where you're going. Does this, at smaller sizes, does this almost defy a formula?
Right, it's gonna need a,
At some point, somebody's gonna have a shop so small that, granted, you're not gonna have a big sign because it's so small, but at the same time, how do you quantify that in a formula that someone can read and understand? Which I guess is what you're poking at.
right, trying to figure out how to come up with something so we can smooth this out.
But wouldn't it serve the city, doesn't the current situation serve the city by requiring those applicants to come before us when they want something dramatically different from code? I mean, perhaps it adds to the workload a little bit.
Well, that's
but
what
it
we're trying
leaves-
to eliminate.
Well, but we at least maintain some oversight of what would be appropriate. What happens if somebody comes in with 40-foot square footage on a pocket business and,
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out, what number
Where?
would be, so
Okay.
we can streamline where, like this is a 31,
sure,
and that's the one that went through the city of San Antonio and then came back to us.
let me go over here. Do you have, one of you guys, nope?
Well, I can go ahead. Yeah, I think to me, I think we're saying 10 is the minimum they can have. If they're so small that they don't kind of go off the chart.
Are they even
By
effective
10.
at that point?
Hang on.
But 10, 10 is, from my professional perspective, that's, you might as well not have a sign. When you have a parking lot, 60-foot setback from a thoroughfare, you don't see that. It's irrelevant. You know, I mean, the question is, you know, I think that some guys have had a little bit of advantage that they get a slot on the monument sign or the pylon sign, or I guess we only have monument signs, but not everybody gets that, you know. There are definitely shopping centers where they can't afford it, or there's 6, 8 businesses and 6 lots, and they're relying on a wall sign, and, you know, if they're down to 10 feet, I mean, that's pretty small.
Because even when you look here, taco place is 18, the place for lease is 20, you know, so.
Would it be useful, does the commission think, to do as we've done in similar situation as we've considered these types of changes, is to at least ask staff to help by surveying surrounding communities on their approach? Would that be at all helpful?
Anybody's input is welcome.
Yeah.
I think we probably need to do what we're doing with it on an individual basis, simply because it's so difficult to have a standard measurement or something that applies to everybody. We're going to come to cases that's going to be different, and we're going to need to put some personal thought and touch into it.
Well,
but maybe there's a happy medium between here where we can work out some mathematical formula, at the same time recognize we need to give a decision on these things, even though we have a formula.
I was going to ask Alex if he wouldn't mind sharing his view. He's been
Thank you,
on
Mr.
this
Chairman.
commission
I'm not
as
going to
well.
sway the commission one way or the other. I agree, and many times this has come up where we have that situation. I would only point out one thing, and that is that the examples all given were of a wall that has a complete flat wall that runs up 18, 20 feet tall. Remember, the ordinance is written for those that have a complete flat wall where you're looking at it like this and saying, wow, a 20 square foot sign is nothing compared to the size of the wall. But remember, this ordinance also applies for a sign that is on a wall below a roof line. And if you allow something that's 30 square feet under a roof line, you're going to think, oh my God, that's a problem. And so whatever recommendation that's come up, consider that as well before we just come up with a number or formula, because you want to consider the different types of structures you're putting it on as well. And I would agree, these look small. Maybe there's something to say that the square footage of the side of the wall is being on is considered.
Right.
Might be, because then you can say that the sign is proportional. But if you're putting it on something that has an 8-foot ceiling and is 18 feet wide, and you allow a 30 square foot or 40 square foot sign in there, it's going to be way out of proportion. So maybe proportion is something you want to look at as well. Just a thought, because it is frustrating to them. With regard to the neighboring communities, the hard part is that we're all surrounded by San Antonio, which is our chief issue with our developers, right? They say, well, across the street, they have something, and they don't have any regulations, and they let me get whatever they want, which, as we've heard on this commission many times before, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that we want to allow it just because it's across the street. So it's a delicate balance, and I applaud Ron for bringing it to the commission and saying it needs to be addressed, because you're right, it seems out of that, but maybe a proportional approach might work as well, just in another idea.
Michael?
I'd be willing to look at something to measure it by a proportion. I think that might be one of the most useful options relative to mathematics and, walls and stuff like that. Other than that, maybe that's just on us to have the work, because I think, like I said earlier, I think when you look around, especially what we've been working on for all these years around Bandera and all that, I can see that we've been working on it compared to other areas, and it shows. So maybe we just have to do the work. I don't know, but save that. I think we can look at proportion. That may be an easier way to look at it. But I think in the long run, I've said this for 20-something years, it's how you manage it. Which I know you're trying to get to a better way or easier way to manage it, but maybe work for us that we have to endure. I don't know, but I think the proportion would be worth looking at. I'm not sure about the other ways, because like Alex was saying, there's all sorts of little, but this,
I can raise it with staff.
Yeah.
Susan can as well, and I agree. San Antonio is kind of the gorilla room. But we have had useful opportunities to look at what, say, Bulverde or Chavano's done, just to, because they're dealing with the same thing too. San Antonio's coming at them. So maybe that could be part of the conversation.
Sure. The other one that we're referencing is, remember the pizza place right here, the new shopping center? You know,
Sure.
you know, it looked good, but it didn't conform.
But keep in mind that that pizza place, like most of the other businesses around here, have multi-tenant signs as well.
Right.
So
But
it's
just,
not their only signage.
but the look.
Do you look at the multi-tenant signs when you drive down the road?
I'm too busy looking at my phone.
Of course you are.
Kidding.
Can I make a quick comment?
All right, I think we can. I was kidding. I said I was kidding, Frank.
Real quick, I bumped into someone at the car wash the other day, a lady from out of town, and she said...
Can we take it off record? Would that be all right?
No, you can do whatever you want.
Let's close this out here.
Well, can we just revisit this?
Yes, this can, I will make sure staff knows that we're still discussing this.
Right, so we'll revisit next meeting.
Yep, we'll keep this on the agenda.
Since the way they,
Well, that was a misprint.
well, yeah, but it was,
Fair enough,
yeah.
fair enough. Well done.
Okay, we'll go make a motion to table it?
Yep,
till next meeting?
well, I don't need a motion. We can,
Okay, just, okay.
we're discussing it. We'll bring it
We'll
back.
bring it back on,
Also continue
May.
discussion.
Hey, hey.
What I was gonna say is the lady,
Hang on, we'll close
the
this out.
lady was
Okay.
talking about signs.
Okay, wait,
1 second.
Let's close this out first.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
May I
Ron, you have
make a motion
Yes. Go ahead.
to adjourn?
I always ask you to do that. Second.
Who seconded
All in
it?
favor of adjourning, signal aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned at 8:32.